She called me the nagging hag of the family, loud enough for the whole baptism hall to hear. So I handed her a letter, sealed, heavy, and dangerous. I'm Eleanor Gallagher. I'm 72, and I've spent the last 15 years being erased, one ignored phone call at a time. But at my great-grandson's baptism, surrounded by white lilies and polite smiles, I finally stood up. She thought I'd stay silent. She was wrong. Ever wondered what one letter could do to a perfect family facade? If you've ever been pushed aside by the very people you raised, tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? The scent of lilies hit me the moment I stepped inside the church, delicate and suffocating all at once. My heels tapped softly against the stone floor as I made my way down the aisle, past polished pews filled with Caroline's family, their smiles frozen and immaculate. No one stood to greet me. No one waved. My place wasn't among them, and I knew it before I even reached the side bench, tucked discreetly near the back like an afterthought. The baptism of my great-grandson, Thomas Robert Gallagher, had already begun. Caroline, in her pristine ivory dress and practiced grace, stood near the altar beaming for the photographer, every angle curated, every expression measured. My son, Michael, stood beside her, eyes scanning the crowd until they met mine. He offered a tight smile, polite, dutiful, but not warm. I returned it with a nod and a hand pressed gently against my chest, just above the letter resting in my purse. The paper felt heavier than its weight, ink soaked in years of silence. Caroline had mailed me the invitation 3 weeks ago. No phone call, no personal message, just cardstock and elegant cursive like I was an acquaintance, and not the woman who had raised her husband through grief and grit. This was the first time I would lay eyes on Thomas, already 3 months old, and even then it was clear. I was not part of the circle. I was here because the photo opportunity demanded it. I found my seat far from the rest of the family, the only chair on the far side of the nave. A folding chair, not one of the upholstered pews. It creaked when I sat. My hands, veined and trembling, reached for the small blue-wrapped bundle nestled in my handbag. A hand-knitted baby blanket, ivory yarn with navy trim, Thomas's name embroidered carefully in the corner. I'd worked on it every evening for months. My gift was love, quiet and steady. I only hoped it would be allowed into his life, even if I no longer was. After the ceremony, the crowd filtered into the church hall where tables had been set with pastel tablecloths, tea sandwiches, and name tags shaped like tiny doves. I hovered near the entrance, unsure where to go, unsure if anyone would notice if I left. Then I spotted Jessica, my granddaughter-in-law, cradling Thomas near the refreshment table. "May I hold him?" I asked, voice soft, cautious. Jessica looked up, startled, then smiled with something close to warmth. "Of course." "She's just settled him down," Caroline interrupted, gliding in like smoke, her lips pinched in that perfect half-smile. "Let's not wake him again." Jessica's arms froze mid-motion, then handed the baby back to Caroline with a muted apology. My hands dropped to my sides. I just wanted to give him this. I extended the wrapped blanket. Caroline barely glanced at it. "We already have plenty. But thank you." She didn't take it. She turned away. "It's handmade," I murmured. I thought, "Just leave it on the gift table," she said flatly, waving vaguely toward a cluttered corner. I placed it there carefully. No one noticed. No one asked who had made the blanket. A woman I didn't recognize, perhaps Caroline's cousin, nudged it aside to make space for a towering box wrapped in shiny blue foil. The gesture felt surgical. The room buzzed around me. Conversation, silverware clinking, a baby fussing briefly. I stood near the punch bowl, hands clasped. No one approached. A few offered tight smiles. Michael spoke to Caroline's father, nodded solemnly. He didn't look my way. Then I heard it. "That's Michael's mother," Caroline said, her voice light, almost laughing. "The nagging hag, always criticizing, always finding fault." The clinking stopped. Not completely. Just enough that I felt the ripple of silence, the pitying looks cast like stones. My fingers found the edge of the table. Steady. Don't react. Someone giggled nervously. Someone coughed. Michael stood not 5 feet away, unmoving. He didn't correct her, didn't glance in my direction, didn't blink. In that moment, I remembered what Robert had said when Michael was just born and the hospital staff had forgotten to bring me a chair. "If no one makes room for you," he whispered as he pulled up a metal stool from the hallway, "build your own damn chair." I straightened my shoulders and turned. The envelope was already in my hand, cream-colored, sealed, my handwriting deliberate across the front. Caroline's name. I walked through the murmuring crowd, past paper streamers and trays of mini cupcakes. She turned when she saw me, eyebrows raised like I was a child interrupting grown-up talk. "I'd like you to read this," I said, my voice calm, almost too quiet. I placed the envelope in her hand. "When you're alone." Her fingers curled around it slowly, and for a heartbeat her smile held. But it didn't reach her eyes. "What is this?" she asked, voice faltering. "Something I should have given you a long time ago." I didn't wait for her reply. I turned, walking past the stunned circle of guests, past Michael, who looked suddenly pale. As I reached the door, I glanced back once. Caroline still stood there, envelope clutched like it might burn her. Her smile had vanished. Her eyes scanned the room, then the letter, then the hallway. She knew, and she was scared. And for the first time in 15 years, I walked away not as a guest who overstayed her welcome, but as someone who finally reclaimed it. Was I invisible to my own family, or had I simply let them stop seeing me? 3 days, not a single word, not a text, not a call, just silence. It settled around me like fog, creeping into every room of my apartment, blurring the edges of my resolve. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, its deep, slow rhythm the only sound keeping me tethered to time. Outside, a distant siren wailed, barely cutting through the thick quiet inside. I hadn't turned on the television. I hadn't opened the curtains. The light felt too harsh, too revealing. Everything in the apartment was in its place. Cushions fluffed, dishes stacked. The blanket I'd made for Thomas folded neatly on the armchair where I'd left it after returning from the church. Untouched. Like me. I kept replaying that moment. Caroline's voice slicing through the room like broken glass. The nagging hag. The way the laughter faded. The silence that followed. Michael's silence. He'd stood just feet away. He'd heard her. And he had said nothing. The envelope had felt like a stone in my purse for weeks. I'd taken it out and put it back in so many times I couldn't count. I had written that letter carefully, rewritten it twice. The photo was folded inside, tucked in a plain sheet of paper. No accusations, no anger, just truth. On the second night, I dreamt of Robert. We were in the hospital again, the day after Michael was born. I was exhausted, swollen, but glowing. He held our son like he'd found the missing piece of his soul. "He's ours," he whispered. "No one gets to erase that." I woke with tears on my cheeks, tangled in the throw blanket on the couch. The next morning, the phone rang. Michael. My heart jolted before I even reached it. I picked up on the third ring. "Mom," he said, his voice clipped. "What did you give Caroline?" I paused. The clock ticked once, twice. Something she needed to read. "She won't tell me what it is. She's upset. Really upset." I imagine she is. A long silence. Then, more forcefully, "Why would you do this now?" That day was about Thomas, not about whatever this is. The old instinct to defend myself rose fast, like I had to explain why I existed in his world at all. But I swallowed it. "Michael," I said quietly, "maybe you should ask her." He sighed, that heavy exhale I knew too well. "You've always had to make things difficult." Then he hung up, I stood there, phone in hand, the dial tone buzzing faintly before I set it back in its cradle. So that was that. A confrontation postponed, but not avoided. I knew Caroline hadn't told him about the photo. Yet. She would wait, like she always did. Wait to control the story, to shape it, soften it, spin it. If she thought she could. The memory of how I found the photo clung to me like smoke. It was Christmas. Michael had asked me to help with the new laptop. He couldn't find the photos from Lisa's winter concert. I'd clicked the wrong folder. There they were, dozens of shots of Caroline dressed to the nines at some corporate gala. But the man beside her wasn't Michael. In some, he had his arm around her waist. In others, their faces were too close, too comfortable. She looked radiant, unbothered. I printed one photo, just one. I placed it in an envelope with a letter I wrote over many nights. Not an attack, just a timeline, a quiet record of what I'd seen and when. A gesture of truth, not malice. For 6 months, it had sat in my drawer. I'd never planned to use it, until Caroline called me the family hag. The afternoon wore on. I made tea, let it go cold. I sat in Robert's armchair, the upholstery worn in just the right places, and watched the shadows move across the living room. Then the phone rang again. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. Grandma? A whisper. Lisa? I straightened. I know I'm not supposed to call, but are you okay? Her voice was tentative, careful, like she was checking if I'd break. I'm all right, sweetheart, I said. Just surprised to hear from you. I heard them fighting, Mom and Dad. She won't tell him what was in the letter, but she's been crying, a lot. I hesitated. You shouldn't be in the middle of this. I already am. Her voice dropped. Grandma, I think Mom's lying. She said some awful things about you after the baptism, but I never believed all of it. I just didn't know what to do. You don't have to do anything, Lisa, I said gently. Just take care of yourself. I miss you, she said. I don't even remember the last time we spent time together, just us. I miss you too, I whispered. We didn't say goodbye. She just hung up, quietly, like a ghost stepping back into the shadows. I sat with the silence again, but it felt different now. There was a thread of something in it. Tension, yes, but also possibility. Then later that evening, the phone rang a third time. Eleanor? A familiar voice, raspy with age and a lifetime of unfiltered cigarettes. It's Martha. Martha Lewis. I nearly dropped the receiver. Martha, I breathed. It's been too long, I know. Her laugh was warm, unhurried. I don't know why, but you've been on my mind this week. I just had a feeling. Well, you're not wrong. We talked for an hour. About everything and nothing. About PTA meetings from 30 years ago. About her daughter's third divorce. About the aching way time slips by. Then she said, there's a group I go to. At the community center. Wednesdays. Women our age. Some divorced, some widowed, some just tired of being invisible. Come with me tomorrow. I started to say no. The words were right there. Habitual. Safe. But then I thought of Caroline's voice, of Lisa's whisper, of Michael's sigh. I thought of the silence. Yes, I said. I'd like that. Martha chuckled. Then wear something colorful. You've been gray too long. After we hung up, I stood in front of my closet, sliding aside the cardigans and beige blouses I'd worn for years. My eyes landed on a turquoise shirt I hadn't touched in over a decade. Robert always said it made my eyes look like the sky before rain. Maybe I wasn't meant to fade. Maybe I'd let them dim me down, one slight at a time. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally done with gray. She admitted it was her in the photo, Michael said, standing stiff in my living room, but she swears it meant nothing. He wouldn't sit, just hovered near the window like he might need to escape at any moment. I poured him coffee anyway, the way he liked it, cream, no sugar, and set the mug down on the table between us. He didn't touch it. I looked at him quietly, taking in the tired lines around his mouth, the way his jaw clenched when he was angry but didn't want to say so. "And do you believe her?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, just like he used to when he was a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew. "I don't know. She said it was just a colleague, a friend who was going through a rough time, that they got close, that it was emotional, not physical." "That's a lot of words for nothing." He winced. "Mom, this isn't easy." "No, it isn't." I leaned back in Robert's armchair. "But it's necessary." He stared at the mug. "You've been quiet all these years. Why now?" I hesitated. I could have told him about the last straw, the blanket, the insult, the pitying glances, but it went deeper. That photo, that red dress. "I found it last Christmas," I said finally. "You asked me to help with the new laptop. I opened the wrong folder. I saw things I shouldn't have." He looked up sharply. "You've had it that long?" "Yes, I wrote the letter weeks after, rewrote it 3 times, and then I waited. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd misread it, or maybe she'd change. But when she called me a nagging hag in front of the whole family, I paused. She handed me the moment, so I handed her the truth." Michael didn't reply. The clock ticked in the background, steady and unforgiving. "That dress," I murmured, more to myself than him. It wasn't from any family event. I'd never seen it. Only in that photo. Only in betrayal. A silence stretched between us, long, heavy. Finally, Michael stood. "I don't know what I'm going to do," he said. "You'll do what you always do," I said gently. "You'll protect your family. Just remember, I'm part of it." He nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw something shift in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but maybe a crack in the wall between us. That afternoon, I went with Martha to the community center. It was a plain brick building that smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon-scented floor cleaner. The room was bright, chairs arranged in a circle, some women chatting softly as we entered. Martha squeezed my arm. "They're good people," she said. "No performances. No judgment." A woman named Grace introduced herself, then gestured for us to sit. The conversation started lightly. How someone's cat had destroyed a puzzle, how another woman was learning to make sourdough. Then, without ceremony, Grace said, "Anyone want to share something real today?" I surprised myself by raising my hand. "I was called a hag last week," I said simply. Heads turned. "At my great-grandson's baptism, by my daughter-in-law, in front of a room full of people, and no one defended me." There were a few gasps, a murmur of sympathy. "I gave her a letter," I continued, "one I'd been holding on to for months. It wasn't revenge, it was the truth, the kind that burns through silence." Martha gave a small nod, eyes glistening. Dorothy, a regal woman in her late 70s with large glasses and even larger opinions, leaned forward. "I stayed silent too long once," she said. "My daughter stopped speaking to me for 10 years. All because I let someone else narrate who I was." The others nodded. Grace spoke next. "It's hard to reclaim your place once someone's decided you're expendable." I hadn't expected to feel understood, but I did. These women, some strangers, seemed to grasp what my own family could not, the ache of being erased. As the session ended, I lingered to help fold the chairs. Martha handed me a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. "You look 10 pounds lighter when you spoke," she said. "Truth does that." We walked to her car in the golden haze of late afternoon. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lisa. "Can I come visit? Just me, please." My heart skipped. I typed back, "Of course, any time." She arrived an hour later, wearing a hoodie and nervous eyes. When I opened the door, she launched into my arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything, for not calling, for not being brave sooner." "You're here now," I said, holding her tighter. We sat on the couch. She looked around like she was seeing my apartment for the first time. It's cozy, she said. Some might say cramped. She smiled. Mom always made it sound like a cave. I prefer the word haven. Lisa nodded. I never believed you were what she said. I just didn't know how to ask. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Sometimes silence is survival, but speaking is how we heal. We talked for an hour. She asked about Robert, about Michael's childhood, about the old armchair and the grandfather clock. I told her stories I hadn't told in years. She laughed, sometimes too hard, like laughter was a new language. As she stood to leave, she hugged me again. Dad's checking Mom's phone tonight, she whispered. He's starting to ask the right questions. I nodded, heart heavy and hopeful. After she left, I stood by the window, watching the streetlights blink to life. I thought of the envelope, the dress, the photo that had waited like a loaded truth in my drawer. If the truth shatters what was false, was it ever really whole to begin with? Rain tapped softly against the window pane, a steady rhythm that somehow matched the thudding in my chest. The air inside my apartment was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of coffee I hadn't touched since morning. Michael stood at my doorway, a large, weather-worn cardboard box cradled in his arms. His eyes were red-rimmed, not from the weather. There are dozens of them, Mom, he said, voice shaking as he carried the box to my coffee table. Birthday cards, letters, all from you, hidden. My breath caught as he lifted the lid and the past came spilling out. Envelopes with familiar loops of my handwriting, packages carefully wrapped in tissue and twine, postcards from vacations I'd taken alone. One by one, he pulled them out, like unburying bones. I reached for the first card on top, Lisa's 10th birthday, a glittery front with cupcakes and confetti. Inside, my message, still bright, still full of love. I'd included a gift card to her favorite bookstore. She had never said thank you, because she never got it. She said you forgot my birthday that year, Lisa said softly from the armchair across the room. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something between guilt and fury. Michael looked down, hands trembling as he lifted another envelope. Christmas 2019. She said you didn't want to do gifts anymore, that it stressed you out. She told us you hated mess, James added quietly. That's why we didn't visit. She said you got overwhelmed. Each sentence felt like another crack in the facade. Michael pulled out a smaller item, a photograph, my memory album. I thought I lost this during the move, I whispered, reaching out as if touching something sacred. He handed it to me with a shaking hand. I opened the worn leather cover and saw Robert's face staring back from a faded Polaroid. Our first apartment, Michael's first day of school, Lisa's birth, James's kindergarten recital. Moments frozen in time, all carefully captioned in my handwriting. These are the moments she tried to erase, I said, tracing a photo with my finger. But look, you were loved. Michael sank onto the couch like something had broken in him. I let her silence you, Mom. I let her make me forget who you were to me. I placed the photo album on the table and went to the bookshelf. From the second shelf, I pulled a silver frame I'd kept hidden. Michael, 12 years old, grinning with a ribbon in hand, my arm around his shoulder. We were beaming, hopeful, undivided. I set it gently next to the album. Lisa walked over and stared at the image, her hands curled into fists. She lied about everything. She told a version that suited her, I said softly, and I didn't fight back. I thought staying quiet would keep the peace, but silence doesn't keep anything whole. It just keeps it hidden. The room was quiet, but for the rain and the distant hum of traffic below. No one reached for the coffee. The box sat open, the contents a graveyard of unseen affection. Michael stood again, his posture no longer stiff, just defeated. What do I do with all this? I looked at him. My son, older now, wounded but finally seeing me. You do what your father would have done. You start with the truth. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I need to talk to the kids, all of them, and Caroline. Lisa moved to sit beside him, resting her head lightly on his shoulder. Outside, the rain had turned to mist. As I looked at the letters, the cards, the proof that my love had never stopped trying to reach them, a question lingered in my chest. If love is intercepted, does it ever reach the heart it was meant for? The smell of chocolate chip cookies filled the kitchen as I wiped the counter for the third time in 10 minutes. I'd set the table for 3, Lisa, James, and me. But when my phone buzzed with Lisa's name and the words, "Can I bring someone to lunch, Grandma? It's Thomas." I had to steady myself against the counter. My hands shook as I reopened the toy box, long untouched. I pulled out soft blocks and a small stuffed rabbit that Lisa had once clutched in every family photo. I laid a folded blanket on the couch and adjusted the lighting, wanting everything to feel calm and warm. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to see Michael holding a plump, wide-eyed baby in a blue onesie, cheeks flushed from the spring sun. Lisa and James stood on either side of him, beaming. "Mom," Michael said softly, "I'd like you to meet Thomas Robert Gallagher." The name hit me like a breath of fresh air and a punch to the chest all at once. Robert. They had given him Robert's name. My hand instinctively reached for the gold cross around my neck. "We didn't tell Caroline," Lisa whispered as they stepped inside. "She wouldn't have let him come." Michael handed Thomas to me slowly, almost reverently. The baby looked up at me with wide, curious eyes that mirrored my own. He didn't cry, didn't squirm, just nestled against me like he belonged. "He likes you," Lisa said quietly. "He's usually fussy with new people, but you? He knows." I sat on the couch, rocking gently, the rhythm of generations returning. Thomas grasped my finger with surprising strength. For a moment, the world was still. Nothing else mattered but this child, this symbol of everything I had nearly lost and everything I had just reclaimed. "His middle name," Michael said again, "wasn't up for debate. Dad deserved that." I blinked back tears. "So do you." We sat together at the small kitchen table. I served cookies just as I always had, slightly crisp edges, soft centers. Thomas babbled in his high chair while James showed him how to bang a wooden spoon on a bowl. The sound was sweet chaos, life. After lunch, while Thomas napped in the portable crib Michael had brought, Michael leaned back in his chair. He looked less worn than he had weeks ago, still tired but not hollow. "I wanted to tell you something," he began, hesitating. "I've been offered a teaching position, engineering, at the university." "Michael," I said, leaning forward, "that's what you always wanted." "It pays less," he admitted, "and Caroline's already using that in the divorce." But for the first time in years, I wake up wanting to go to work. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Your father would be proud. I know I am." A sharp buzz interrupted us. Lisa picked up my phone and frowned. "It's Mom," she said. 2 hours, not a minute more." "That's all it says." She slammed the phone down. "You don't owe her anything, Grandma. She's lucky you didn't blow the roof off at the baptism." "Lisa," I said gently, "it's not about owing anyone. It's about making sure he always knows where love lives." Later, when Thomas woke up, I held him again, his head resting against my collarbone. He let out a little sigh, and I kissed his forehead. "This time," I whispered, "I won't be erased." Lisa and James helped clean up while Michael packed the baby bag. As they stood by the door, Lisa turned to me, her eyes steady. "You're the reason Dad came back to himself." Michael nodded. "And I'm never letting you fade again." The door closed behind them, but the warmth lingered. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and caught a glimpse of myself. Same silver hair, same soft eyes, but different now. And as I walked past Thomas's empty crib, I knew. The cycle had cracked, but it hadn't shattered. It had made space for truth. Can something broken be beautiful when it's rebuilt with truth? Today, I believed it could. "Happy birthday, Thomas," the room erupted in cheerful voices, but his little feet didn't hesitate. He broke into a wobbly run, those precious unsteady toddler steps, and made his way straight to me. I bent down, arms out, and he tumbled into them with a delighted squeal, the way a child runs only to someone who feels like home. All the sounds around me, paper rustling, laughter, camera clicks, faded into a gentle hum. All I could hear was the rhythm of his breath against my shoulder and the soft da-da-da murmurs that toddlers make when words are still brand new. I had been so nervous walking into Michael's new home today. The house wasn't big or fancy, but it was filled with life. Finger-painted pictures taped to the fridge, scattered toys in the corners, and the scent of fresh lemonade and chocolate cake wafting from the kitchen. It was real and warm and honest, unlike the curated perfection Caroline had always insisted on. She sat stiffly in the corner, her parents beside her, all three of them dressed like they were still attending a charity gala instead of a child's birthday. She didn't say much, just a tight nod when Michael opened the door and a glance that lingered longer than necessary when Thomas ran to me first. Dorothy and Martha were here too, standing by the kitchen counter with their styrofoam cups of punch, chatting softly and smiling as they watched the chaos unfold. Martha had brought her famous lemon bars, and Dorothy wore the brooch shaped like a sunflower. She always wore something bright, as if daring the day not to be joyful. At one point, I handed Thomas a small, hand-carved wooden train. "It's from a friend of mine," I told him gently, watching his chubby fingers curl around the toy. Dorothy's son had made it in his workshop, carefully sanding every edge smooth. Thomas tapped it against the table and let out a delighted laugh, his 2 teeth flashing as he explored the wheels. Caroline had dropped him off without ceremony earlier that afternoon. She didn't step inside. She stood at the door, handed over the baby carrier like it was a package from the post office, and said flatly, 2 hours, not a minute more. I'd met her eyes, steady and calm. "Thank you for bringing him," I said. I meant it. I wasn't here to fight anymore. She'd looked at me then, not with rage or smugness, but something closer to confusion, like she couldn't figure out who I was now that I wasn't begging. She narrowed her eyes and muttered, "You think you've won." I gave a soft shake of my head. This was never about winning, Caroline. It was about being seen. She didn't respond, just turned and walked briskly back to her car, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. But I noticed her shoulders didn't sit quite as high as they used to. The birthday party went on in its sweet, chaotic way. Lisa helped Thomas open his presents, while James carefully kept the wrapping paper from tearing too much. He said he liked reusing them for collages. A small group of neighbors had come, a couple of Michael's new co-workers, and the house filled with the kind of laughter that doesn't come from obligation but from comfort. Later, after the cake was served, classic vanilla with pale blue frosting, Michael approached me with a small, silver-wrapped box. "It's not much," he said, rubbing the back of his neck like he used to when he was unsure of himself as a teenager. "It's Thomas's birthday, not mine," I said with a smile. But he placed the gift in my hands anyway. Inside was a silver photo frame. In it, a candid shot. Thomas and I on my old couch, both of us mid-laugh. His hands were reaching up to touch my face. I didn't even remember the photo being taken. On the back was a simple inscription, "To Eleanor, the heart of our family, with love and gratitude." My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the words. When I looked up, Michael was watching me closely. "I mean it, Mom," he said. "You held us together even when we didn't see it." There was no bitterness in his voice, only clarity. Regret, yes, but also peace, and something like awe. I looked around the room, at Lisa guiding Thomas's hand as he colored with crayons, at James talking excitedly to Dorothy about his writing, at Martha helping in the kitchen like she'd always belonged there. This was what love looked like after the storm. Not perfect, not painless, but persistent. I thought back to all the years I'd sat alone in my apartment, wondering if my place in this family had simply faded, if I'd waited too long to speak up, if silence had swallowed me whole. But here I was, with my great-grandson asleep in my lap, his head nestled into the crook of my arm, with my son sitting beside me, his eyes soft and sure, with my friends watching over me like a fortress of gentle strength. The photo album, the one Caroline had hidden, is now on display in Michael's living room, open, welcoming, no longer erased. Maybe the greatest revenge is simply surviving long enough to be seen. Thomas stirred slightly in my arms, his tiny fingers curling around mine. I held him a little tighter. What if the life I'd been waiting to reclaim had been waiting for me to fight for it all along? As the clinking of coffee cups faded and Thomas drifted to sleep in my arms, I realized this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming space at a table I helped build. I had spent years quietly fading, afraid that speaking up would push my family further away. But silence never protected love. It only let the distance grow. No one has the right to make you invisible. When I finally spoke my truth, I didn't fix everything, but I found myself again. Some tensions still linger, and Caroline's glances remain cold. But now, my photo is framed, my name is spoken with respect, and my story no longer lives in the shadows. If you've ever felt erased in your own family, I invite you to share your story. Let's remind each other that age doesn't make us less worthy, and that sometimes the most powerful act is simply refusing to disappear.